depending on an organization's maturity and pace and where they are as it relates to their AI journey, they may or may not have kind of hit this one yet, but it should be on everybody's radar screen, again, with the good news that there are ways to solve it.
Welcome back to the Teams Insider podcast. This week we have Ryan Herbst, who's Vice President and Chief Device Strategist at unifiedcommunications.com. We get into the whole unifiedcommunications.com story, how they came from a headset vendor to now having one of the widest range of all the OEM devices for Microsoft Teams. And then we get Ryan's perspective on the Microsoft Teams devices market, how customers make device decisions, Windows versus Android, some of the kind of strategies around device choices. I really enjoyed the conversation with Ryan. Hope you do too. And many thanks to Mnemonics, who are this month's sponsor for the podcast. Really appreciate their support. They have an awesome call recording certified solution for Microsoft Teams. So thanks to Mnemonics, and thanks again to Ryan. On with the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Been looking forward to this one. Ryan and I had quite a few good conversations offline at various events, and Ryan also joins me on the UT Today podcast sometimes. But we're going to get a bit more deep today. Ryan, for those that don't know you, just want to introduce yourself and a little bit about unifiedcommunications.com?
Thanks so much, Tom. I'm really excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this. I lead strategy for unifiedcommunications.com. I'm one of the principals and founders, and unifiedcommunications.com has been around in some form or fashion since the 80s, and these days heavily focused on the Teams ecosystem and modern work in general, and helping Microsoft customers make good decisions around meetings, rooms, devices, AI, all of the things that are super top of mind to us these days. And that's our charge. That's our mission. We've been at it for quite a while, really since the LCS days. And so we've been on the journey as long as most.
That's awesome. Tell me a little bit about the history, because that's a long, I mean, you were obviously something before unifiedcommunications.com, because 80s predates Unified Communications. How did we end up here?
Yeah, the company was formed as a distributor of Plantronics in the 80s. And so before we acquired it, that was what it was doing. And it was back in the traditional, headsets attached as a accessory to a telephony device. That was the world. And we acquired it, and we're looking to expand. And I think we went quickly beyond just that headset space, which is still a big part of what we do, and beyond kind of single manufacturer, and expanded toward in the direction of where we've gone today, which is into shared spaces as well as the personal the personal story. But yeah, I think it's been a very fun journey, from kind of single product, sleepy small organization that we acquired to a global organization that has a much broader focus than what the organization initially did. Awesome.
And your kind of integration to the Teams ecosystem, the number of vendors you stock, the coverage you have, it's really impressive. I mean, I think you pretty much have everything on your books as far as the OEMs go. Is that right?
Yes, really anything that carries a certified status is on the menu from a unifiedcommunications.com perspective. And we do that on a global stage. So I think it started in the US, and these days that's expanded to Canada, UK, EU, and recently Australia and New Zealand.
That's awesome. And is it a mix of customers can work with you directly? Presumably you work with partners as well. What's the kind of model there?
Yeah, there's a mix. I would say the majority of what we do is touching an end customer. And in some cases, we're attached to partners where hardware or some of our subject matter expertise around particular pieces of the Microsoft solution set are not core to them. Often it's the global fulfillment kind of piece, the engine that we've built, and we've got some specialized software tools as well, some help me choose and configurator type tools that are broadly used by enterprise customers as they seek to both invest on the device side, but also maintain standards and provide some choice. And so we've done quite a bit of work in that area.
Awesome. So you've really seen the obviously Link, Skype Business, and now Teams grow, the ecosystem grow. And it's interesting because you're coming at it not from a lot of the rooms providers are coming at it from an AV heritage, whereas you're coming from a kind of shipping headsets heritage, which is more, in my head, is more of a like box, like let's do like lots of big numbers. Let's not do super crazy complex bespoke stuff. Is that a fair summarization of kind of where you come from?
I think it's fair. And kind of prior to this organization, my background was more on the IT side, and so I think it's super fair to say one that we're big fans of hardware, and that hardware is strategic and important to us, and that we love and care deeply about hardware. I think the other thing that's fair to say is that we come more from an IT perspective and kind of kicked and screamed into the AV space. So I think I came from a world where you could add nines to things by throwing dollars at them. That wasn't the world that we found in the AV space when we arrived on the scene. It's still to some degree not that world. And so it took a lot of adjustment, but I do think it shaped significantly our philosophy and approach as it relates to AV design and more of an IT lens kind of view of how AV could scale and be structured versus being kind of a niche play that it has been historically, and not necessarily something that made a lot of customers really happy in the past.
Yeah, and that seems to align, maybe coincidentally, maybe not, to where Microsoft, when you hear Microsoft vocalize rooms in particular and devices, they're looking for, simple scale, like not 3 days of crazy config, like drop ship. We've got now, obviously Android is very fast. We've got autopilot coming along on the Teams room side. Is that what you're seeing with customers? Because traditionally they would have lots of AV complexity and wrap in an enterprise.
Yeah, I think the story certainly is Microsoft's perspective around simplicity, but it resonates, I think, based on just the journey that customers have been through. I think they went through this traditional AV world where it was bespoke and expensive and custom and had a lot of moving parts, a lot of little powered boxes that occasionally had to be rebooted, extenders, switchers, scalers, and that experience for most customers didn't work that well. I think it had high cost and high complexity. It didn't deliver reliability or consistency, and it didn't allow them really to take the show on the road. It kind of had a different partner in different cities, and I think that experience just was very, very painful. And so I think refreshing to customers is the approach of this can be so much more simple. This can be standardized. Certainly the technology had to support that, and it's evolved. That kind of world where you could pull something out of a box was available for quite some time for personal devices. Initially, you began to see some of it in the smallest of spaces, but that line has changed significantly over the years, where these days, outside of specialty spaces, boardrooms and training rooms and multi-purpose rooms, you can pull things out of the box even for most of the traditional conference room portfolio. And that's game changer, I think, for a lot of organizations, not all of whom have discovered this. I think there's plenty that have a pretty traditional playbook, and they may have built out a lot of infrastructure and have a lot of people supporting more traditional view on AV. But I think they're quickly seeing the light that this can be much faster, and they really have to, because I think the reliance on collaboration technology and the ability to leverage these tools in this modern, fast-paced AI world is just a prerequisite. And so I think to be competitive, this is one of those aha moments that a lot of organizations are having, that we've got to change our approach.
That makes sense. What do you see? I get fortunately talked to quite a lot of enterprises about their strategy, and that there's lots of standardization and like, here's our small, medium, large. But on the other hand, there's lots of OEMs, there's competitiveness, there's innovation. How do you find customers balance those two things? The idea of having standards and the fact there's new options, every 6 months, if not every 3 months.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think standards are key. I think it's also the case that in this fast-paced, lower cost, world that where the clip of innovation is taking place, just very, very fast. We have to take some snapshots. We have to kind of recognize that we have to look at standards much more frequently than in the past. And so I think the days of locking and loading for 5-year refreshes are kind of long gone. And so I think these days it is about creating a standardized approach, taking a snapshot, reviewing that maybe a couple of times a year. And I think that one of the beauties of having a standardized, interface and management and approach, the way Microsoft has kind of brought this to bear with Teams rooms, is you can have slight variances in versions and some of the hardware, and you could have different cameras and audio devices in a particular space, but we have the same consistent user experience, and so we think that's important. I think also important is it's certainly fine to kind of think of things in t-shirt sizes in terms of small, medium, and large. One of the things we're often encouraging customers to think about as well is just the experience, because I think in some instances the same size and capacity space could have very different kind of intent in terms of how a particular business group wants to use it. And so sometimes within that menu, you could have same kind of medium space attached to some different personas or profiles where one may be more focused on ideation and brainstorming and creating content in the room, where others might be more around consumption of content. And certainly all of that is beginning to change as we think about kind of AI, where it's already kind of making its way very, very quickly into the meeting space.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. I guess the small meeting room next to the CEO's office that they use for collaboration, and the small meeting room in the IT building, like you might go for different kit and different use cases there potentially.
For sure.
Awesome. What about you're fortunate to work with all the different OEMs and have lots of options for your customers. How do you see customers kind of trying to standardize, or maybe not on certain OEMs? Because that's certainly a conversation I hear a lot is, certain OEMs have bigger portfolios, certain OEMs have a great particular device that people want to bring in, but then there's an opportunity cost there is there, with dealing with lots of different vendors as a customer.
Yeah, it seems like it is much more kind of organizational culture. I think some of them really feel strongly about trying to minimize the number of manufacturers in their environment, and where they can pull it all off with a single manufacturer. That's their preference. I think there's others that are really looking at innovation, and if there's a particular manufacturer that can augment a use case and provide some additional value, they're open to that. I think some of this, as the device management side again becomes more standardized, this is less challenging than it has been in the past. I think it was really painful if you had to have very specific tooling and tool sets and support and user experience implications by crossing those manufacturer lines. But largely, it's either gone or diminishing. I think within the Microsoft world, I think the idea of mixing and matching, which was net new for sure, this idea that you could take a particular compute and touch panel and use a different manufacturer's camera and audio. Back in the Skype days, this was very, very novel and new. And I think these days it's fairly mainstream and supported. But yeah, definitely customer choice. And I think this idea of trying to wade through this huge ecosystem of options, is challenging and I think that the guidance from folks like you, folks like us, around how you kind of lean in and look at what a particular device manufacturer is doing particularly well. I think all of them have some elements, and so often we're part of a process helping customers identify what those standards should look like. And we go through a deep dive on the OEM side, and we're looking at, here's what this one does well, this one does well, this one has a particular way of approaching a divisible space that, it has less integration requirements than another, that kind of thing. And then here's how they approach device management. Here's their kind of global story. Here's their support story. And let's try to at least come up with a short list. And then through some actual testing and proof of concept, usually we can arrive at 1, 2, or 3 maybe inside a large organization.
Yeah, this is the blessing and the curse of ecosystem, isn't it? We get lots of innovation, we get price competition, we get, people really pushing. But if you're coming in cold to this space, particularly maybe you traditionally had an AV team that ran just Poly gear or just Cisco gear, suddenly it's like, whoa, there's 17 bars that are all slightly similar and all slightly different. Like, how do you take custom? Like, is that the process you kind of outlined there? Is what your use case is, and then thinking through what kit might fit? Yeah,
we have a solutions and consulting team, and we feel really strongly that the first approach is to take a step back and look, from a high level at organizational needs and where they're going, and generally as part of that process. We have a workshop type engagement where we're focused on strategy of where they're going, where Microsoft is going, what they're doing today, what they're trying to solve. And there's an OEM kind of deep dive component to that process where we're trying to identify either one or a short list of OEMs that seem like they really align well with what they're trying to do. And that that includes in the team's world discussions on Windows versus Android and all of there's a lot of nuance there, the kind of all-in-one, the bar approach versus the decentralized type products, the all-in-one touch products these days. There's quite a bit of opportunity. And so I agree with you. I think ecosystem can be a little bit daunting, but it's really an opportunity if you can fine tune and leverage it. But it does take some guidance and expertise. And if it's not something you do every day, you got to reach out to some professionals for help.
Yeah, I would say it's really challenging. There are some great customers that have in-house teams that have labs that test stuff out. And I feel like they're really privileged to be sent kit and test kit and play with it, and they can make some quite informed decisions. As you get lower down, you get from the tens of thousands to the 1,000 seat count. It's really tough because how could you possibly, your full-time job is not making kit decisions. Like you have multiple things to do. So I think it gets harder and harder. And as we said, the ecosystem is fast moving and very varied, both what Microsoft are doing and then what the OEMs are doing as well.
Couldn't agree more. Hard enough for those of us who it is our day job to keep up with, but fortunately, there's resources available. I think for those customers and add resource and wide options of ecosystem, and you can arrive at a pretty exciting solution.
Awesome. And what have you seen? Like again, you're fortunate to see lots of customers, all the different OEMs, all the different form factors. Have you seen anything in particular being more popular or less popular? Any changes in trend?
It's interesting. I think certainly on the Windows versus Android kind of question in the Teams room world. I think we've seen certain customers that are that have really gravitated toward the appliance approach. I think some of those same customers have wished that some of the speed and innovation that they've seen on the Windows side kind of existed on the Android side, and I think quite a few of them have recently taken more of a hybrid approach where they may be placing Android devices based on their simplicity and price point in more simple spaces and smaller spaces, and leveraging Windows devices for spaces where one, they really want to make sure that they're participating in the innovation kind of process as quickly as possible. And two, they want the confidence of Windows plug and play and to know that they can iterate and evolve in that space over time, which is an easier story to consume on the Windows side. I will say that MDEP, Microsoft's device ecosystem platform, or Mandroid, as I like to call it, could have some interesting changes. I think one of the I think organizations have struggled a little bit to understand and to manage around Android lifecycle, I think to some degree, in a way that's been more complex than and harder to some degree than it has been for Windows. And I think there's some hope that MDEP, if executed properly, could help extend some of those life cycles, and then could bring some consistency to some of the areas, and also some additional security and credibility, I think, to the story that hasn't necessarily existed on the Android side based on how it's architected today.
Yeah, it's a really good point you make. And Android is really tough to again, coming in from not spending full time in this space, the idea that there's certified life cycle based on the Android OS, but the OEM can choose to patch to a new major version and recertify, but will they or won't they? Can they or can't they based on chipset? And
Exactly.
I feel like, if you're the enterprise trying to make your choice, having to understand the implications of what chipset the vendors use, where that device is in life cycle. I've seen some really challenging scenarios where customers have bought kit right towards the end of life cycle. And they're like, "Oh, I got a great deal." I'm like, "Yeah, but did you get a great deal?" Like, think about like PCO and when how long this is going to be supported. So it's interesting that Android is doing so well despite some of that challenge. It shows that there's definitely appetite for that, whether it's price point or simplicity or a mix of the two.
Yeah, you're right. And I think that one of the reasons is that maybe only the most sophisticated of customers have kind of uncovered the soft underbelly.
Yeah. Well, I feel like more and more we've got changes now happening for the first time, where the older IP phones are going to, as we record, September 2024, there's a change happening where the older IP phones will actually stop working. Now their end of certification, end of support have been for a while, but there's a bunch of customers that assume IP phones will just tick along indefinitely, because what do? They make calls and receive calls, but there's an infrastructure change that is going to stop them receiving calls, which is kind of the first time at a decent scale we've had a scenario where something's been actively, broken, even though it's old and out of certification.
Agree. Yeah, and we're involved in a couple of those as well, of some devices that held previous certifications that no longer do, and don't have a path forward either, including through SIP Gateway.
Yeah, and this is where the advice is so key, and picking OEMs again. I like to spend time with customers like that. I feel like, maybe this is generalization, but I feel like often they're quite quick to go straight to specs and resolution and lenses and cameras, and spend less time on the financial health of the OEM. Can they ship globally? What's the support process? What's the timelines? What's their management? What's their, have they been in the Microsoft ecosystem for 10 years or 5 minutes? Well, there's lots of non-device factors I feel are super important when you're making your device decisions.
I could not agree more. And I think, the life cycle side, I think it's something that as customers become more aware and get a little more sophisticated, they're starting to demand. And the larger they are, the more that they're going to ask for and require some commitment on, which is not easy to deliver from an OEM perspective, because for all the reasons that you shared. They don't necessarily even control all of it. They are reliant on the chipset manufacturers even if they could. And then there's certainly cost involved, and those OEMs have to decide whether they want to put the cost into upgrading a legacy product or selling a new product. And it puts them in. It's an interesting position to be in.
Awesome. Another thing I wanted to kind of quiz you on was AI, right? Like Microsoft, we're coming into the new FY. AI is definitely top of mind for Microsoft. What are you seeing in a practical, useful sense in terms of rooms? And there's various features. Are you seeing any of those features starting to hit yet? Is it more of a conversation? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I would say the big one that's hitting now. I mean, I think there's things that are crossing our desk daily, and then there's a groundswell of interest in leveraging these devices for more and thinking of the room in a different way. But I would say that first rubber hits the road area that is around attribution and transcription from the room. I think as organizations go through their piloting and adoption of technologies like Copilot that can provide and Teams Premium that can provide a recap and summary. quickly they're discovering that this is awesome, except when we have a group of folks in the conference room and the whole transcript and recap.
Yeah, arguably some of the more useful scenarios where we've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people in a meeting now.
So I think that is quickly coming back to the AV team, and as hey, we've got a challenge in this kind of exciting journey toward AI. We're one of the most one of the lowest hanging pieces of fruit, which is recaps and transcription and summaries, are not working in our conference spaces. And so I think the good news is there's a way to solve that today. And there has been for quite some time, and that the story it just gets better. There were some purpose-built devices, these intelligent speaker devices that were allowing us to do this type of attribution in shared spaces to particular users in the past, and now that world is moving to the cloud and is available. At least on their Teams Room on Windows world, today, without requiring a specific hardware device, and is coming. Yeah,
that's a huge unlock for customers on NTR and Windows. They've suddenly just opened up per user identifying transcription across those devices. And I think it's coming to Android late this year or early next year as well.
Exactly, and so this is huge. I think all of a sudden. We're leveraging these same tools in our shared spaces, and once you see the transcript, say Tom said and Ryan said, it's really exciting, and you realize that we don't have this gaping hole that we thought we might have had. But I think this is depending on an organization's maturity and pace and where they are as it relates to their AI journey. They may or may not have kind of hit this one yet, but it should be on everybody's radar screen, again, with the good news that there are ways to solve it. I'd say moving beyond this, I think the idea of beyond the AI taking place inside camera intelligence and that side, I think we've seen that in the past, and that continues to evolve and is a very important part of creating engaging experiences these days. Is we don't want to hit buttons and manually move things. We'd like things to happen in an automated fashion, and for the system to be intelligent enough to make decisions around cameras and angles and multi-camera and that world, which has been here to some degree, but is really starting to hit kind of mainstream today. And I would say that the next wave of this is walking into a room and really thinking about this device as an assistant and its access to corporate information and access to the type of information that can sit inside something like Copilot, and to be able to use it as to transcribe a meeting, to record, to provide information, and then certainly this new kind of world of thinking about Copilot less as a personal tool and more as a team assistant has huge implications as we come into a shared space like a meeting room.
Yeah, some really good points there. I think the multi-camera is really interesting to me as well, because I feel like we've had the technical capabilities to do it in previous technical iterations, but it was restricted to typically very high end, and you even had those rooms where somebody would literally be controlling a switcher and doing it. And the fact that AI direction can kind of commoditize that again, and we can have center of room cameras or multi-camera and have the system intelligently pick the right frame or the right perspective. That's really exciting, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think we had a wave of customer requirement changes post-pandemic as executives came back and kind of were no longer tolerating the boardroom experience that was super kind of zoomed out and reference security type view.
It's funny how that happens when the executives go home and they're like, "Oh, this is rubbish." Like,
right. I totally agree. And yeah, I think there's another wave brewing now as that light bulb goes off on just how much more interesting and engaging it can be to see very little of this and to see a lot more of this.
Yeah.
This wasn't really possible without significant expense and or manual interaction in the past. And I think the story is really here today, but is going to continue to develop this and next year. And it's among the areas that we're most excited about, because it really makes the experience so different from an engagement perspective.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, thanks for taking the time to jump on the pod. I appreciate you sharing all your insight and perspective. I guess if people want to find out more, unifiedcommunications.com, probably the first place to stop.
Absolutely. They can find us. They can reach out if they also find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. And would love to answer any questions if this sparked an interest somewhere. But no, it's been amazing and really enjoyed spending some time on the podcast, Tom.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan.